All right, guys, welcome to the end of day and as well as end of week video for Friday, the 17th of November. Congratulations, another week in the books. This was another strong performance by the market. That's I believe that makes 3 in a row. So very nice. If you look at some of these month-to-date numbers over here, you could see what's going on here. We'll start with the macro stuff, because I think that what you're seeing there in TLT and in the dollar backs up what we're seeing in equities. TLT is up 7.7% now for the month, and the dollar is down 2.4%. So I've tweeted this out a couple times. I tweeted out a chart of what the dollar's been doing side by side with what bonds have been doing and what equities have been doing, because I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think those are going nicely hand in hand. Clearly as well, there's been some short covering too. So, that has provided, tinder for the market so far in November. Next week, we've got a shortened holiday week. We've got Thursday off for Thanksgiving. Friday's a half a day. You also have NVIDIA reporting earnings on Tuesday. You've got a couple other interesting companies like Zscaler, I think, reports earnings as well next week. But month to date, I mean, these are very stellar numbers, right? And making up quickly for the past couple months of underperformance before we got to the month of November. You've got Qs up 10%. Don't worry, I will also go over all the week's performance too, but I always like to start with the day. And by the way, risk disclaimer in front of you, everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. So for today, excuse me, you had the VIX go down about 3.6%. Look at those small caps come right back. I've mentioned how I'm not going to talk bad about the small caps today. Whenever I talk real bad about the small caps, they usually go up, so you could use me as a contrarian indicator. But yes, I do believe that they are a great day trading vehicle, considering that they are very sideways for the year. But there you go. And look at the micro caps too. That was up 2.1%. It did kind of feel like, and this is something that we laid out in the trading room earlier today. If you go rewind to yesterday, the market pretty much had bad breath, right? Small caps were down a lot yesterday, and there was a lot more. If you remember yesterday's not watch list, but this sector map right here that you have, there was a lot more red than there was green. But what held up really well was the big cap tech. I hate to say the term, but it's just easy to know what I'm talking about. The Magnificent Seven names, I call them Great Eight because I throw Netflix in there. But those really did quite well yesterday. Today, we just kind of identified that they were probably going to take the day off for the most part, and some other sectors might come into the picture. And I think when you let me just take this off here. Yeah, so here's what those names did today. I think you had 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were red for the day. And Apple was just slightly negative. Google was down 1.2%. Microsoft down 1.7% on that news of Sam Altman leaving OpenAI. Netflix was in the red a little bit, and NVIDIA was in the red. Tesla was slightly green, and Amazon outperformed. Kind of interesting. I was looking at that Amazon chart pretty closely this week because you did have a gap fill right in here, and nice bounce back, right? And I think that the trend is intact. Also, one other name too that I'll kind of get out of the way too, but I think this Meta doesn't look bad either. It's kind of slowed down a little bit, but nice fill of the gap like in here, and reclaiming of the 5-day moving average. And I don't think that there's anything to really complain about this Meta chart, right? Nice little trend. Kind of came back in a little bit yesterday, and the dip was bought yesterday. So there you have it in terms of the major indices. Everything else was kind of a bit flattish for the day, where the small caps really outperformed. And then when you go to sectors, a little bit surprising, biotech had a big week this week. Here's, by the way, I will bring up the as I kind of go back and forth talking about the week. Here was the week's performance. You had biotech amongst the leaders, plus 8.6%, very strong. Look at the banks too, right? A lot of this performance was basically today and Tuesday, right? I'll go through that with you in just a second, but look at the solar companies as well, up 10%. So you did have some of the underperforming areas of the market really excel. I want to go through a couple of these charts with you just so that you can kind of have a little bit of perspective here, but I sent out a chart earlier in XBI. It was a Bloomberg chart. It wasn't a Thinkorswim chart, but you can get the same idea here. This is almost like 1, 2, 3, 4 times kind of checking back into the same support area. So some people think like, that could be like a very big head and shoulders type pattern, with the double shoulder there, maybe on both sides, but really it's still holding that support. Would I go out, for like a short-term trade and buy this chart? No, I wouldn't. But, for long-term, you do have support to trade against, depending on what type of a trader you are. I mainly stick to trend, to uptrends, but it kind of looks somewhat appealing if it can kind of hold that, $61, $62 level. So I think that that's compelling. In the short term, if you're looking for, some type of a short swing trade, I would watch 72.88, right? Notice that, we made a little bit of price, made a little bit of a higher low here. Again, but for the most part of this year, I've been talking about biotech pretty negatively because anything that's trending down or showing relative weakness, I usually talk negatively about. But I thought that performance was very impressive for the week, and now we'll see if we can get out of the value area for November. That again, that's 72.88. And I'll also talk a little bit about solar because yes, I kind of find this funny too. Just as I mentioned, you can use me for a contrarian indicator when I talk really negative about something, like I did yesterday about the small caps. A lot of people use the Barron's cover for a contrarian piece too, because they mentioned they had clean energy with like a broken fan on the cover, and sure enough, the solar group was up 10%. Again, if you look at this chart on the daily chart, and it doesn't really seem like that would be 10%, but it is from the lows, even though solar is down, and right, I get why they're putting that on the cover. They're just a little bit late doing so. A little bit. I'll kind of give them, I'll be nice here. But if you look at the performance of the solar ETF, it is down 37% year to date. When you contrast that with, say, the Qs, which are up 45% year to date, that's a really horrible trade to be in. I wanted to look at one name that if you're looking for some follow through action, it's nice to always have a level that's nearby so that you could say, okay, this has been a really underperforming area. Let's say I want to try a trade. I would be looking at First Solar for a further catch-up trade. And if it doesn't, and like you don't have to look at all of this to the left. All you have to do is basically look at right here and say, if it breaks 155, 83, maybe you could look for a move up to 172. That's a decent percentage move, right? And that's up to this version point of control, or you can use this extension away from the November value area. Yes, there's a whole bunch of other overhead supply, so that's why I wouldn't be looking much more for that. But again, that's not a bad looking trade if you wanted to try a bottom feeder. Also notice it's a little bit different here. So let's look at the solar ETF. Let's look at the solar ETF on the weekly chart. So again, downtrend, right? Very bad looking, but you do have I think that's a bullish engulfing candle, good volume on that. So yeah, the bounce could continue in something that's really beaten up. Look at the difference between the solar ETF and First Solar. To me, I would rather own the one that's, above the value area and showing some relative strength in a weak group. Now, again, you could trade this versus, you could wait for that signal on the daily chart that I just mentioned, but also note that it did bounce there right where it needed to, which is the top of value area for the year, right? This has been an outperformer over the last few years. It just has really corrected pretty decently down from 220 down to 134. So I may look at that trade next week, right? I'm looking for some new ideas because I think that we've had some just amazing moves in terms of, names that have had good earnings and have just continued to move and to break out, right? I've got an earnings watch list now at this point with about 70 names on it. I call it my, both the gap, my earnings gap list, and just strong earnings. So, those names, a lot of them still look good, still in some of those names. But I wouldn't be surprised too. I'll just say this with a disclaimer because I think everybody's kind of thinking this too, is that, hey, there could be a little bit of a pullback in some of these names, and that would provide a buying opportunity. The dips so far have been very shallow, right? So far in November. And, I think that's just because there's still a lot of people, or there has been a lot of people so far in November that, are playing catch up right now in the market. So eventually everybody will get caught up. I mentioned the fear and greed index, even though that's not my favorite gauge of sentiment, but I know people quote it, they look at it, right? And I think that's now back to greed. So, yeah, we could see a little bit of a move back, and there would be nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. All right, let me go back to this week's performers. And then we'll talk about it. I'll go through a couple of individual names and talk about some of the names that I'm in, and what they did and what I traded for today. But yeah, just to kind of round this out, I also thought what is nice is to see some international, right? IFA, which is your international I call it international developed markets. It's mainly Japan and Europe. That was up nicely. That was up 4%. So that's good to see too. The home builders also had a great week. I like that group, even though it didn't, go up as much as some of the other names here, but I just like upgrade. I like uptrends, right? And I've been adding some risk in this group as interest rates kind of go down a little bit. ITB is still getting settled in here around this version point of control, right? But you could kind of go through, right, and you can look for your outperformers. I like this BLDR. I traded this a lot over, the last couple years. It's been a strong name. I did add this back. I was long this a couple weeks ago. So I've been going through this pattern of, I got long a few names, or I got long, names that I've got long that made a really nice profit that I may have taken profits in. Now I'm kind of going back in after a little bit of digestion. So Builder was a name that I got in yesterday. And still I'm looking for this to kind of pivot out of this, little area, and digestion is not a bad thing here. Pulte was a name that I added today. I know that's a bit extended, but I do like the leadership here of the home builders. Again, look how much better it looks than that ITB ETF. So I think pretty good looking. Just to go over one name that I talked about in yesterday's video, this worked quite well today. This was Broadcom. Right. I talked about this is another one that I was in, right? And I took profits in this one, and now was waiting for a little bit of digestion, and back in this with kind of a partial position as of yesterday. I took I took a little bit of money off the table with a quick target in that one. DraftKings was a name that I added back. Again, same thing, was a name that I was long. Got waited for a little bit of digestion here, and re-added yesterday. This name was up 2.8%. So again, these names did very well today versus the Magnificent Seven kind of took the day off. I mentioned Meta already. FLR, right? So nice, crude made a nice bit of a recovery today. This is a name that we saw a lot of option activity earlier in the week. I was not able to take target one yet, but I'm looking for a move for basically to take half the trade off at around 39.43. I know that's not that far up there, but it's not as volatile as a name as other names. One name that dipped on Walmart that hasn't recovered yet, but I'm going to be watching next week. No position in my trading account yet, but I like this Costco. right? Give it some time. Again, like if we see a little bit more rotation next week, this would be a name that I would be interested in. Notice how it's just checking back here, right? So not extended, just checking out to the breakout level. Notice that the version point of control acting as a bit of a magnet, right? Price doesn't want to give that, one doesn't want to get out of this area quite yet, but I think pretty good. All right, and I'll try to get, I'm keeping this video kind of short, but I thought it was just interesting to go through some of these names. Hilton was a name I got long, and it's still going here. Very nice mover. Again, probably not on the as I tweeted this out about a week ago, I said, hey, not on the top of most people's lists, but that's one hell of a technical breakout of this consolidation. That was at 156. The stock's up to 168. Right. So again, you don't have to, like, the reason why I show some different names rather than all high growth is because what'll happen is from time to time, just like I was talking about the Magnificent Eight or Seven, whatever you want to call them, they took the day off today, right? You have to have in my opinion, you should have a plan of what are you going to do on days where there's a little bit of rotation, right? What areas are you going to look at? There are some good market leader names outside of super high growth. So I know DraftKings is fun. Palantir, right? All of those real popular names, VRT, right? But they're all kind of in the same category. They're very highly watched on Twitter, right? And by growth traders, but the market isn't always going to be about growth, right? So again, I'm not forcing anybody's hand here. I'm just saying it's nice to have a couple names like a Costco or a Hilton, right? That are doing something a little bit different. Other names that made 52-week highs that I thought were interesting, like here's one too that you don't see too many people talking about. Parker Hannifin, right? GE had some continuation too, right? So again, like to me, it's nice to be in something like this because it will happen, right? You will see one day where we see this all the time. Like a name will that's part of the cyber group or part of the software group, they fall in earnings and they take down every one of those growth names with it, right? It's just part of market mechanics, right? So, and when those names get really overcrowded, they could come down rather quickly when people, when institutions want to take some profits in that group, they'll all tend to move together, right? So again, it's nice to have a little bit of some different names. CPRT is another name. Now that's not the best looking candle for the day, but another name that broke out to all-time highs. Let me just mute somebody 1 second. Somebody has their microphone open. That's nice. All right. So so that's basically it. And then also the one other thing, because I like to always understand where the performance came from. If you look at the performance for this week, right? So no doubt, nice week, right? If you go back to the performance, right? You had SPY up 2.3%. The small caps outperformed 5.4%. Qs were up 2%. But just keep in mind, a lot of the performance for the week came from one day in the Qs, right? And that was on Tuesday. That was the CPI report. Other than that, the Qs were kind of a little bit, the overall Qs, not to say every name in the Qs, because there certainly was some good performance, but you could see for yourself, Monday Qs were down. And then without that Tuesday in there, it was essentially a flat week for the Qs. IWM, again, always interesting to look at IWM because it doesn't move with what the Qs and the S&P are doing. But similarly, right, if you look at what happened on Thursday, down 1.6 and recovered a good portion of that today. But if you take out these 2 days, again, the performance all came from Tuesday from this week. So that said, if you did a good job Wednesday, if you look at what you did on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and you managed to squeak out some gains from Wednesday and Thursday, Friday, you did a hell of a job, because a lot of this market is about investor psychology. When you have a day like that on Tuesday where you're up that much, right, your head can begin to kind of play games with you in terms of, thinking like the FOMO and geez, this market is really running. But it just kind of, the reason why I bring this type of data up is just to give you perspective about where those gains came from. And if you're not careful, you could easily kind of reverse what you're doing by pushing at the wrong times. All right, guys, I will end it there. Here's how our watch list showed this over the weekend, last weekend. This is how our watch list did, not this week, but last week. So a lot of green on the screen. And then this week, right, just interesting, right? So here was our grade 8 list, and here's what our watch list did for the week. And I add names as we go during the week, but if you look at the best performers for the week, Trex was up 8.6%, and then from the trigger. This isn't the overall performance for the week. This is what they did from the technical breakout that I had listed. Also BLD, which is another builder, so that outpaced a lot of the other names. Now there's several names that were not a slouch in here. Zscaler was up 6.4% from the trigger. CrowdStrike was up 5.2%. DraftKings was up 6.6%. So you had your performance there, but as mentioned in this video, you had a bunch of different places that you could have gotten your alpha from this week. This dual, which I just put back on the watch list yesterday, really nice in 2 days, was up 2.7%. Nice to see these names get down to the 5-period moving average and bounce quite nicely. So it's a strong market. We'll see what we get next week. Members, you could look for the member video out this Sunday, as well as the new watch list. And you could also get a hold of that by going to tribecatradegroup.com, putting in your email address, and you can get a 5-day preview of our end of day email and our midday email for 5 days. Guys, have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.